Hello guys, welcome back to the MMASucka podcast. My name is Fraser Crow, and as you'll probably see, I'm on my own today. Tim has been in Holland covering all things Glory 84, but rest assured he'll be back tomorrow. What we're going to do this week on the podcast and on the YouTube channel is give you plenty of UFC 286 fight week content. So I'll be on my own today, just reviewing the week that's just gone by. We had a blockbuster UFC fight night card, a really good Bellator card, and we also had some PFL sprinkled in there on Friday night. Going forward this week, tomorrow, Tim will be back. I'll be joined by Tim again tomorrow, and we will be previewing UFC 286. I think this is probably the way going forward is how we're going to do things for pay-per-view events. We'll probably do a smaller preview show with either myself and Tim, or just me, or just Tim. And then we'll have a whole bumper show previewing the 285 pay-per-view. So we don't miss out on any of the pay-per-view worthy, talking points. John Jones, Cyril Gane last time out, we had to focus on that. And this week we have to focus on UFC 286, the main event between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. There's too much to talk about to just sort of shoehorn it in at the end. So that's what we'll be doing. But on top of that, this week, so Monday, you've got the preview podcast, the review podcast, which is what this podcast is today. Tomorrow, you'll have the preview podcast for myself and Tim. And then on Wednesday, I'll be previewing the early prelims for UFC 286, looking at every fighter on that early prelims card, giving you a pick and giving you a little sort of insight into the fighters on there. Thursday we'll have the sort of the main prelims. I think I'm not sure what it is in the US, but we'll have the prelim preview on Thursday. And Friday we'll have the main card preview. That one will be a little bit shorter because obviously we'll talk about the majority of it on tomorrow's preview podcast for the full card. But we're giving you content every single week, and then obviously next Monday or Tuesday we'll be jumping straight in a review of UFC 286, everything that went down. And I think that's maybe the way to do it. On Friday we'll be giving you a review of a preview of the main card, so we get to see the press conference. We get to see how the guys are looking during fight week. I know a lot of people are there. A lot of people have made their way over to London already. Obviously, Justin Gaethje and Kamaru Usman are already in London. I know Casey O'Neill's made the trip over. Obviously, Leon lives here in the UK anyway. So, Fridays we'll really be looking at how the guys have been acting during fight week and how, I think that those fights will play out with a few picks. But let's jump straight into a review of the weekend. UFC Fight Night, Yan versus Dvalishvili, live from Las Vegas, not in the Apex. This felt like one of the old sort of UFC cards with a smaller arena, with a smaller sort of indoor show. I think it was a sort of like a hotel, but what a card this was. On paper we thought that it would be a really good card. There was plenty to look out for, and then it played out. It played out as a really, really interesting card. There's some of the finishes, some of the performances. There was multiple fights that could have been fight of the night. But we'll jump straight into the main event. Merab Dvalishvili dominates, batters Petr Yan across 5 rounds to get a 50-45 victory. He's maybe the most relentless fighter that we've ever seen in the UFC, and that's saying something when we've had some absolute athletes in the UFC. Khabib constantly in search of the takedown, but not like Merab. 49 takedowns attempted across 5 rounds, so he's averaging almost 10 takedown attempts per round, and he didn't gas out at all in that fight. For the first, I think 2 or 3 rounds, he didn't even sit on the stool in between rounds. He's attempted 401 total strikes and landed 202 of those total strikes. Significant strikes attempted 338, and he landed 147 of them. And Petr Yan just could not get his game going because he was so conscious about being taken down. Whenever Merab would strike with him for a little bit, he'd throw a couple of shots and get on a leg. When he was wrestling, he'd break and he'd strike. Petr Yan had a huge welt over I think it was his right eye at the end of the fight because he was landed upon. Merab he just dominated him with work rate. Is Merab a great wrestler? Statistics would probably show that he's not. He landed 11 of those 49 takedowns. His takedown accuracy is just 36%. He is on Saturday night, 11 of 49, that's 22%, which really isn't a great percentage as far as accuracy is concerned. But it's his relentless nature of searching for the takedown that makes him such a dangerous prospect at 135. And I say prospect, I don't think we can call him a prospect anymore, because he will probably be ranked number 1 or number 2 in the division come tomorrow's ranking changes. What makes him so good, is that he constantly keeps opponents guessing. Against Jose Aldo last time out, he didn't score a single takedown in over 16 attempts. But Jose was constantly considering and sort of being concerned about the takedown shot. He landed more takedowns against Gustavo Lopez back in 2020, I think this was. 2021 maybe. Oh no, it was 2020. Yeah, he landed more takedowns against Gustavo Lopez. He landed 13 of 18 attempts. But against Petr Yan, he landed 11 of 49. And Petr Yan just couldn't handle it. He couldn't hang with Merab. He didn't know what he was doing. He was striking with him. He battered that lower leg, the sort of calf of Petr Yan from the orthodox stance. So Yan was forced to fight southpaw, which, that's what makes Petr Yan so dangerous. He can fight southpaw or he can fight orthodox. He's a legitimate problem at 135, Merab Dvalishvili. But where the issue lies is that his training partner and one of his best friends, someone that he calls brother, is the champion at 135, Aljamain Sterling. And this week it was announced officially that he will be clashing with Henry Cejudo on May 8th at UFC 287, I think it is. So what do we do with Merab? I think he has the style to beat anybody in at bantamweight, and I mean anybody, Aljo included. We know that he won't fight Aldo. I can see him completely clearing out the division. Logically, what makes sense is on that May 8th card is for Merab if he can make the turnaround and face Sean O'Malley in a 3-rounder on the May 8th card to determine the real number 1 contender, because there's a lot of talk about Aljamain Sterling moving up a division to 145, or maybe even Merab moving down a division to 125. He's a thick guy, he's got a lot of muscle mass. I'm not sure if that move down to 125 that might not be the best thing for him, but we'll see, because we know that he'll never fight Aljamain Sterling. It is all dependent if Aljamain Sterling loses to Henry Cejudo. Don't think the UFC, to be honest, are a massive fan of Aljamain Sterling. What with the way that the Petr Yan fight finished the first time round, and then obviously the second time round was a split decision. I thought Aljo won that pretty convincingly, but I can't see him getting an immediate rematch with Henry Cejudo if Henry does win that one. So maybe Merab versus Henry is the fight to make. At the back end of the year, should Henry Cejudo beat Aljamain Sterling, but we won't know anything until May 8th, really, with regards to the sort of title picture. But as I said, Merab is, I think, of those that are in the division at the moment, I think he's the second best fighter in the division. We don't know. Henry Cejudo is not technically in the division at the moment. We don't know what Henry Cejudo will look like coming back off 3 years, a 3-year sort of retirement, sort of 3-year absence from competition. We're not sure what he'll look like. I think he's top 1 or 2. Him versus Aljamain Sterling would be, unfortunately, we know that they'll never fight, but it would be a fascinating fight because Aljo is very good off the floor. I think he maybe handled Sean O'Malley with that kind of work rate that he showed against Petr Yan. Obviously, Yan and O'Malley had that very close fight on Fight Island back in October. That is a fascinating fight. Merab versus Sean O'Malley. It makes a lot of sense because Sean O'Malley can crack, and we know he can. We know he's got good takedown defense. But with the style that Merab has, we don't know if he's going to shoot for a takedown, if he's going to, batter your lower leg, if he's going to strike with you, if he's going to throw a high kick, if he's going to throw a body kick, which he did a lot against Petr Yan. And like I say, it's a legitimate problem. And it's a shame in a way that his teammate is the champion, because we might, we'll never see them two fight. And we may get to a point where we never see Merab fight for the title. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. These guys are loyal to each other, which is great to see. And, again, like me and Tim always say every week, bantamweight is the best division in the UFC at the moment, in our opinion, in my opinion. And this just shows it. You've got two guys arguably at the top of the division, maybe 1 and 2, maybe 1 and 3, that won't fight each other because they're teammates, but they're the two best fighters at this weight, and it's fascinating. Going forward to the co-main event, I was a little bit disappointed in this one. I picked Romanov before the weigh-ins. I picked Romanov. Volkov looked very good. He defended the takedown, and Daniel Cormier said on comms, it looked like it broke Romanov's heart when he couldn't get the takedown first after his first, few attempts. He's credited with no takedowns out of 5 attempts. Total strikes attempted 1. This fight went over 3 minutes, and he's attempted 1 strike. Volkov looked really good. He looked back to his sort of spiteful best, as it were. I'm a little bit disappointed with Alexander Romanov. I'm sure people have seen on social media and on Twitter, he looked ripped against Marcin Tybura last time out. And yes, he lost. I think that was a split decision. Let me just double check that. I know, so it was a majority decision. 29-28 on 2 cards and 28-28 on another. It was a close fight between Alexander Romanov and Marcin Tybura. And then he comes into this fight. Let's be honest, I don't like to say this, but overweight. He was 25 pounds heavier for this fight than he was against Tybura. He just looked so uninterested, to add 25 pounds, it wasn't 25 pounds of muscle. It was fat. He looked out of shape. He looked like he couldn't be bothered. He looked like he hadn't really trained for this one. And once he got the takedown, once he failed on the takedown, it broke his heart, and his whole game plan fell out the window. And for a wrestler like Romanov to be finished on the ground by a striker like Volkov is disappointing. I was really disappointed in Romanov's performance, and I think so was Volkov. We didn't learn anything more about Volkov than we already knew. We knew that he had a good takedown defense. We knew that he was a spiteful striker. And we knew that he can fight long. Well, he did all of those things, and he got the first round TKO victory. And his call outs make a lot of sense. I think he called out Cyril Gane. Obviously, he lost to him across 5 rounds before. He wants to get that one back. He called out Derek Lewis. Obviously, he was dominating Derek Lewis until he wasn't. And he mentioned a fight with Tai Tuivasa, which is a new matchup for us, which would be, I think, a fascinating battle of strikers. Let's not forget, Volkov was best part of 15-20 seconds away from getting a title shot. Derek Lewis, off the back of that win against Alexander Volkov, got the title shot against Daniel Cormier at MSG. That would have been Volkov's spot, I believe. And yes, he's fallen on slightly hard times. He was dominated by Tom Aspinall, but it's kind of like who hasn't been dominated by Tom Aspinall in their career thus far. But if you look at he's got the TKO victory over Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Got the TKO victory now over Alexander Romanov, both in the first round. He did lose to Tom Aspinall in the first round, but he's bounced back from that really well. And I think he could still be a contender at heavyweight. I think the Tai Tuivasa fight makes a lot of sense. Not sure if the Cyril Gane fight makes a lot of sense, but at the same time, maybe Cyril Gane sort of licks his wounds, as it were, and tries to return against someone that he's already beat after losing to John Jones so decisively last time out. But that's one to see. That's one to sort of keep an eye on. I wouldn't say the return of Alexander Volkov, but the resurgence of Alexander Volkov. Next up, we had Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann. Obviously, this was meant to go down, I think, 2 weeks ago in the main event, and Krylov on fight night had to pull out. It was announced on the main card, and Ryan Spann was devastated. This is the first fight that he supposedly actually full-time trained for, had a training camp or whatnot. This was a crazy fight for as long as it lasted. It did only last 3 minutes and 38 seconds, but it was frantic. For light heavyweights, it was frantic. The guys came out swinging at each other, and then they were trading submission attempts. Supposedly there was only 3 submission attempts attempted, but visually it looked like a lot more. Ryan Spann had that D'Arce choke. Krylov had the guillotine, and then obviously finished it with a triangle choke. It's a shame for Ryan Spann, because this was really the fight to sort of cement himself in that sort of upper echelons of the division. But it's kind of the story of Ryan Spann's career this far. You know, he lost to Johnny Walker, who bounced back against Misha Serkinov. He lost to Anthony Smith. He beats Ion Cutelaba, beats Dominic Reyes, loses to Nikita Krylov. It's a shame for Ryan Spann, but you know, I do think he'll bounce back. He's not particularly young, but you know, he's 31 now. But for a light heavyweight, he's not. That's not an old. He's not an old light heavyweight, and I still think there's big fights out there for Ryan Spann. I'm gutted for him that he didn't get that main event victory, that main event fight, that main event chance last time out. But you know, it is what it is. They rescheduled it, and unfortunately lost. But you know, looking at Nikita Krylov, he's getting a sneaky sort of winning run together. You know, he's got 3 on the bounce now. Alexander Gustafsson in London in July blew him out of the water in just over a minute. He then defeated Volkan Ozdemir by decision, and now defeats Ryan Spann in the first round. Krylov is also one to keep an eye on, because he's the kind of guy that could, you know, you could see fill in at late notice for a title opportunity. Even, you know, he's one of these guys. Jonathan Martinez looked relentless in the clinch against Saeed Nurmagomedov, and I'm not sure if Saeed Nurmagomedov took Jonathan Martinez particularly seriously. To be honest, it was a close fight for sure, really close fight, and there's been a lot of debate online as to who won it. I think the work rate just won it for Jonathan Martinez. You know, yes, he didn't throw as many strikes, but he was more accurate with the strikes. You know, the Saeed landed 101 of 134, and Jonathan Martinez landed 78 of 96. It was the work in the clinch, and you know, he didn't do an awful lot in the clinch as far as striking is concerned, but he was able to sort of control Saeed in the clinch. And you know, Nurmagomedov's going to be gutted with that when he might drop out of the rankings. Jonathan Martinez might take his place in the rankings, but you know, like we said, bantamweight is such a competitive division that it's difficult. If you drop a loss to someone like Jonathan Martinez, with the greatest respect to Martinez, you're going to struggle to sort of prove. You know, you're going to have to win a lot more fights to get sort of back in that position that you were in, which I think Saeed might struggle to do so. Mario Batista, great fight again at bantamweight. Again, you know, we can't be shocked that these guys are putting on brilliant fights at bantamweight. He looked great. You know, rear naked choke in the first round. Not much more to say about that, really. Came out with a frantic pace and got the submission. Really fun fight for, you know, the 3 minutes 18 that it lasted. And this was a really fun fight as well. Victor Petrino versus, apologies, I'm going to butcher it, Anton Turkalidze, Perino's opponent. Sorry, you know, like I say, I told you I'd butcher it, but these guys went at it for 15 hard minutes. Just when you thought that Petrino would lock in a submission, his opponent got out of it. You know, it's takedown after takedown. He was hurting him on the feet. Then the bell would come. Really fun fight. Got fight of the night, rightfully so. I think it's the UFC debut for both of these guys. Yeah, I think maybe both coming off the. Oh no! So we had a Turkle G. You know, his you know, like his nickname is the Pleasure Man. But anyway, he had an opportunity against Jayton Almeida, and then obviously this opportunity. But that was a really fun fight. Further down the card, you know, I think Ariane Lipski dominated JJ Aldrich, really kept it long, kept it mean, kept it spiteful. The best performance of her career thus far, in my opinion. She's finally shown the sort of form that we saw in KSW. You know, she came over with a lot of hype and hasn't really lived up to that hype. You know, 2 losses in a row to Joanne Calderwood and Molly McCann. Then she bounces back with 2 wins. Then she has 2 losses to Antonina Shevchenko and Montella De La Rosa. Then she beats Mandy Baum. Then she loses to Priscilla Cachoeira. And now, you know, Ariane Lipski beats JJ Aldrich. If she can keep on fighting like that, she's going to be a real contender at 125. But, you know, she's had that inconsistent form as of late. And, you know, it's not awfully convincing that she will keep that form. But if she can, she's going to be a real problem for anyone at 125. Because, you know, she was striking long. She was keeping Aldrich on the end of her punches and being mean and spiteful about it. But performance of the night, dangerous Davy Grant takes the fight on short notice against Rafael Assunção. He's probably losing the fight. He has that point deducted. He's being taken down a lot. He's being controlled by Assunção in both the first and second round, and then pulls it out the fire in the third. Spinning back fist, knocks him down, and then manages to lock out a inverted triangle, which is kind of ironic because that's what a lot of people know Assunção for, locking in an inverted triangle against. I think it was against Jorge Masvidal, from what I remember. Let me just check that because I'm not sure if that's correct. But obviously, he holds a victory over Jorge Masvidal back in the day. But it's a really, really phenomenal win for Davy Grant. So I'm getting my inverted triangles mixed up. But Assunção does hold the victory over Jorge Masvidal, and it was Toby Adama that locked in the inverted triangle against Jorge. But I think for me already, that submission of the year locked up. It's going to be really tough to beat that for anybody. Davy Grant gets the win, and Davy Grant is, again, he can be a real problem at 135. He's got some massive wins. Jonathan Martinez he knocked out. He lost to Marlon Vera, close unanimous decision. Sorry, a unanimous decision, but that was a close fight. Split decision against Adrian Yanez. Again, really close fight. Then he knocks out Louis Smoker, and now he submits Rafael Assunção on short notice. Davy Grant's a problem for anyone at 135, and he's a fun fighter to watch. He gets finishes. He puts, even when he loses, he puts it all on the line. So that was the UFC fight night, Yan versus Dvalishvili. We now head over to Friday night, Bellator, start of the lightweight tournament. We didn't really cover on the show last week because we had so much to talk about, but Usman Nurmagomedov, dominant as always, dominated Benson Henderson for as long as it lasted in a fight that many kind of predicted. It was one-sided going into it, and it was one-sided coming out the other side, unfortunately. He knocked him down. Usman knocked Benson Henderson down with a head kick. It was always a bit of a mismatch, and I think it would go down as a rear naked choke victory because it was just, the commentator said, oh, he hasn't got it. Oh, wait, yes, he has. And he locked in the submission. And, Benson Henderson retired after this fight. He threw his gloves down in the octagon. It's a shame to see such a legend go out on a loss, but at 39 years old, he hasn't got anything more to prove. Former UFC lightweight champion, I think former WEC champion. He's fought, I'm just looking down his record now, 3 pay-per-view bouts. He was the captain of an Ultimate Fighter series of season, I believe. Plenty of fights in WEC. He's fought a who's who. 2 wins over Donald Cerrone, lost to Anthony Pettis, Jim Miller, Clay Guida, 2 wins over Frankie Edgar, win over Nate Diaz, win over Gilbert Melendez, Josh Thompson, Ruslan Khabilov, RDA, Cerrone again, Jorge Masvidal, victory over Jorge. Then he obviously kind of one of the first notable guys to go from the UFC to Bellator. Beats Patricio Pitbull, loses a split decision to Michael Chandler, split decision to Patricky Pitbull, beats Roger Huerta, beats Adam Piccolotti, loses again to Chandler, loses again to Brent Primus, and his last victory against Peter Queally, there was levels above for Benson Henderson and Peter Queally, and then he does go out on a rear naked choke loss to Usman Nurmagomedov, which I think is very much seen as like a passing of the torch. Phenomenal career, and we also saw Rafael Assunção retire in the UFC. 2 of the WEC sort of stalwarts. No disrespect to these guys, but the game's moved on from these guys, and I think both will go down as legends of the game without a doubt. The co-main event for Bellator 292 saw Alexander Shelby beat Mustafayev in a strange finish. It's really nice, it's a teep kick to the solar plexus, which as he teep kicked him, his foot kind of slid down slightly and hit the cup. Very confusing finish, but a good one. Jason Herzog determined that it was the body kick, not the sort of cup tap that that had hurt Musayev, and the victory went to Shelby, and rightfully so, in my opinion. I think that was a fair determination of really good refereeing by Jason Herzog. And MVP, just he's coming off the loss to Logan Storley, who obviously fought for the belt a few weeks ago and lost that fight. He was coming off the loss to Mike Perry in BKFC. Many question what Michael Page is sort of about. He's 35 years old now, still one of Bellator's biggest draws. He's opened up the main card on this one, and as I've always said, I'm a massive fan of leg kicks. I hated this one. If you haven't seen it, if you're squeamish, don't go and look for it. But if you haven't seen it, go and look for it. He kicks sort of below the knee of Yamaguchi, and supposedly, I think I read online that he sort of broke or ruptured his patella tendon, and you can see the knee just instantly go. And that was 26 seconds into the fight. So what did we learn again about Michael Page? That he's got brutal kicks. Well, we knew that beforehand, so we didn't learn an awful lot, unfortunately. But it is what it is. Michael Page gets back into the win column, and don't be surprised to see him in a big fight with someone at welterweight, and then maybe in a title shot, because he's marketable, but he's a nasty, nasty striker, and you don't want to be on the end of one of his kicks. And just to round out the show, this one was always going to be a slightly shorter one. It's just a review of the weekend. PFL on Friday night. Impa Kasangany, brilliant knockout, gets the contract with PFL. And I spoke to Impa before the fight. I'll link the interview below. He's just one of the nicest, most humble guys. He's fought in the UFC. It didn't quite go his way in all of those ones. He's fought on sort of more local shows. He gets his opportunity. He's a training partner of Delano Taylor, who made the finals last year, so he knows what it's all about. And he got the victory, and I'm absolutely chuffed for Impa. And it's nice to see one of the good guys of the sport actually sort of get his dues and really prove that he's at that top level of the sport, and he deserves all the praise that he's getting at the moment. So yeah, I'm absolutely chuffed for Impa Kasangany on Friday night. But the story of the weekend for me is Merab Dvalishvili just dominating Petr Yan, and proving that he's about that life. He's about that sort of championship mettle. Would his gas tank last over 25 minutes? It absolutely did. And he put on a dominant performance. And he deserves all the plaudits and the victory that he got. So like I say, tomorrow, me and Tim will be jumping back in on the UFC 286 preview. And throughout the week, we're going to have previews on the early prelims, the prelims themselves, and the main card for UFC 286. So keep it locked to MMASucka. All the links will be down below for all the good stuff, and take it easy.